Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander back into a world lit by oil lamps and restless ambition long before your local pharmacy shelves glowed with energy drinks and focus boosters. You're stepping into the quiet, wood-framed laboratory of 1800s Japan. The air is thick with incense, ink, and something faintly medicinal. Glass jars line the walls like sleeping spirits, each labeled in kanjaroots, powders, dreams. You probably won't survive this much curiosity, but let's see how far your imagination can go. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and the time where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little community reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand beside a man named Nagai Nagayoshi, a Japanese chemist trained in the German-style alchemist of the modern world. It's the 1880s, and Japan is racing to modernize after centuries of isolation. The country is importing science like treasure microscopes, lab coats, Western ideas of progress. Nagai, wearing round spectacles and infinite patience, leans over a glass dish. Inside it lies a crystalline substance extracted from Ephedra sinica, a humble shrub used in Chinese medicine for centuries to ease breathing and awaken the body. You can almost smell the sharp, piney bitterness of the plant as it surrenders its secret. Nagai isolates ephedrine, a stimulant that quickens the pulse and clears the lungs, a respectable discovery for the time. But what he doesn't know is that this plant spirit, this tiny molecule, will one day ignite an epidemic of sleeplessness that circles the globe. Historians still argue whether Nagai fully understood the potential of what he'd found. Some say he only wanted to make better asthma medicine. Others whisper that he sensed something deeper, chemical shortcut to vitality, to endless wakefulness. Whatever the truth, the spark was struck. You imagine him working through the night, lantern glow flickering against the bottles. The rhythmic sound of glass-stirring rods clinks like a metronome of destiny. Outside Tokyo, then still Edo hums with transformation. Samurai shave their heads and don Western suits. Steam trains scream through rice fields. And in one quiet room, the seeds of a future drug crisis begin to germinate, though it still smells faintly of herbs and progress. Back then, Japan's scientists were obsessed with catching up to Europe. Chemistry was a kind of patriotism, a way to prove Japan could stand among empires. So, Nagai keeps refining ephedrine, testing, distilling, observing how it sharpens the mind and opens the lungs. He writes notes in elegant brushstrokes, probably not realizing that every stroke is another step toward global chaos. You can almost hear his thoughts. What if this could be improved? The question every inventor eventually regrets asking. Ephedrine, at first, feels like a miracle. Soldiers use it to stay alert. Factory workers breathe easier. Students pull all-nighters before the word all-nighter even exists. And yet, in the background, you sense a faint unease, like the buzz after too much coffee. But in your soul, you lean closer to a beaker. See the shimmering crystals inside. They look harmless, almost pretty tiny prisms reflecting the lamplight. But beneath their surface lies a promise, the ability to override sleep, to burn the candle not just at both ends, but through the middle. By the end of the century, ephedrine finds its way into tonics, elixirs, and miracle cures. Traveling salesmen promise it can fix your lungs, your fatigue, your spirit, and why not? It feels clean, efficient, modern, humanity's first flirtation with chemical ambition. A quirky side note: some early users claimed ephedrine made them feel closer to enlightenment, as if constant alertness were a form of wisdom. You chuckle because, if that were true, your local coffee shop would be a monastery. As the 1800s fade, Japan's scientific dream merges with global trade. Bottles of ephedrine begin to circulate in Europe, in America quietly, almost politely. Nobody realizes that this little molecule will one day be cooked in rusted basins under flickering fluorescent lights. You take a slow breath. The air smells like camphor and ambition. Nagai extinguishes his lantern, satisfied with the night's work. His notes read something like, "A new alkaloid, powerful, useful, nothing more." But you and I know he's just opened a door that can never be closed. The room goes dark. The last sound you hear is the quiet settling of dust on glass. The world sleeps, unaware that a century from now, that same molecule will keep millions awake, which is sweating and chasing that first clear breath of ephedrine's promise. You drift forward in time. Tokyo, 1919. The city smells like coal smoke and ambition, streets crackling with a new energy that feels both modern and ancient. Gas lamps glow over narrow alleys where merchants, poets, and inventors move through the mist like ghosts. Somewhere in that tangle of light and steam, a young chemist named Akira Ogata leans over his own small miracle. He isn't searching for enlightenment, not exactly. He's searching for efficiency, the holy grail of a new century obsessed with progress. Using the blueprint left behind by Nagaya's discovery of ephedrine, Ogata begins tinkering with the molecule's structure. It's a subtle change, one carbon here, one hydrogen there. Chemistry, after all, is just Lego for grown-ups, with slightly more explosions. And then it happens. Under the glow of an oil lamp, Ogata distills something purer, sharper, and far more dangerous than ephedrine, methamphetamine. You can almost hear the soft hiss of the burner as the clear liquid cools into crystalline form. Methamphetamine slick, potent, and deceptively innocent-looking glitters like sugar in the flask. If ephedrine was a nudge, meth is a slap, one that wakes you up, clears your head, and makes you feel just, for a while, like a god who doesn't need to blink. Historians still argue whether Ogata understood what he'd made. Some believe he saw it merely as a stronger decongestant, something to help Japan's soldiers breathe easier in cold climates. Others suspect he recognized the deeper potential, a way to erase human limits. Whatever his intention, that night in 1919, Tokyo marked the true birth of the world's most infamous stimulant. You watch him jot a few notes in his ledger, the ink drying as fast as his pulse. The laboratory hums like a beehive of modernity, glass tubing, bubbling mixtures, the faint hum of innovation, or maybe temptation. Ogata probably had no idea that his creation would one day fuel armies, truckers, and midnight chemists in motel bathrooms. Outside, Japan is transforming fast. The Meiji Restoration has turned the country from a feudal island into an industrial powerhouse. Streetcars rattle past pagodas, Western hats mix with kimonos in crowded markets. Everyone is chasing the same dream: energy, speed, modern life. Meth fits that dream perfectly. You imagine a salesman pitching it: instant clarity, total focus, no sleep required. You laugh softly. If that doesn't sound like the modern world in a bottle, what does? By the early 1930s, pharmaceutical companies begin producing methamphetamine commercially. One of them, Temmler, work in Germany, will later call its version Pervitin. But for now, Japan's version, called Philipponbic, comes a quiet success. Students, soldiers, factory workers, all want a taste of this new miracle powder. It's sold in pharmacies without much oversight, often mixed into tonics and inhalers. You picture a Japanese office clerk in the late 1920s, neatly dressed, exhausted, drowning in ledgers. He takes a small tablet of Philippon, and suddenly the world sharpens. Paperwork becomes art. The night feels short, and dawn arrives like a gift. It feels harmless, beautiful even, until it doesn't. There is a strange irony here. The drug that will later destroy so many lives begins as an emblem of progress. Methamphetamine is marketed as sophistication in chemical forms: sleek, modern, efficient. No one sees the shadows creeping behind that glow. You lean closer to the beaker, tracing your reflection in the liquid. It looks calm, like a mirror, but you know it hides the potential for chaos. The line between medicine and poison has always been just a matter of dosage, a quirky little detail. In its early years, some Japanese companies advertised Philippon with slogans like "Win the war against drowsiness," a slogan that will become grimly literal when World War II begins. The idea spreads beyond Japan. By the 1930s, scientists in Germany, the US, and in Britain are all tinkering with similar compounds, fascinated by how these stimulants push the human body past its normal limits. You might call it the world's first biohacking crazonly, with less Wi-Fi and more heart attacks. Ogata himself fades into quiet obscurity. History forgets the man, but not his molecule. Methamphetamine becomes a whisper among doctors, soldiers, and dreamers. Its potential, like a storm on the horizon, hasn't yet struck, but you can feel the static building. You take a deep breath. The air in the lab smells metallic, slightly sweet, the kind of scent that promises miracles but hides something darker beneath. Ogata corks the vial, labels it in neat handwriting, and sets it aside, perhaps unaware that he's just bottled sleeplessness itself. Outside, the city continues to pulse with life. Steam hisses from trains. Neon buzzes against fog. And somewhere, the future begins to tremble like the first faint vibration before an earthquake. The crystal cools, glinting under the lamplight. Silent, patient, waiting. The world will soon wake up to its power, and it will not sleep again for a very, very long time. You blink, and the world shifts. Again, Tokyo's steam fades, replaced by the dusty hum of 1930s America. The air smells like gasoline, cheap coffee, and desperation. The Great Depression is everywhere, woven into every sigh, every soup line, every sleepless night. Men stand in bread queues with eyes dulled by hunger. Women clip coupons and pray that tomorrow brings something more than yesterday. And in the middle of all that hopeless fatigue, someone opens a small brown bottle labeled Benzedrine. You're inside a pharmacy, that looks more like an old candy store, glass jars, polished counters, tin advertisements, promising energy, relief, alertness. A young salesman in a boatie explains it brightly. Benzedrine inhalers, great for colds, but you'll feel amazing. He isn't lying, exactly. Methamphetamine's cousin, amphetamine sulfate, has just entered American life and people are about to start buzzing. Historians still argue whether it was desperation or curiosity that made Benzedrine so popular. Some say it filled a spiritual void, a chemical optimism when faith in the economy was gone. Others point out it was simply cheap, legal, and felt like hope in capsule form. You watch a truck driver pop a tablet before a long overnight route. His hands tremble slightly as he lights a cigarette, the glow reflecting in his tired eyes. Within minutes, the exhaustion fades. His mind sharpens. The road hums like a living thing. He grins and says to no one, "Feels like I can drive to the moon." And maybe, in that moment, he believes it. Across the country, the pep pill becomes an unlikely hero of the Depression era. Housewives use it to stay upbeat, students to cram, soldiers to train, jazz musicians to keep swinging through the night. Pharmacies sell amphetamines over the counter. No prescription needed. A box might cost 20 cents and claim to banish fatigue. You chuckle softly. It's basically the first pre-workout supplement, minus the protein powder and gym selfies. America's relationship with stimulants starts innocent enough. Newspapers call them mood enhancers, not drugs. Doctors prescribe them for sadness, weight loss, and ironically narcolepsy. The irony deepens. The very thing designed to treat sleepiness will soon keep the entire world awake for decades. The quirky fact, Benzedrine inhalers became so popular that people started cracking them open, soaking the strips inside in coffee, or chewing them directly. Imagine that, chewing menthol-scented fabric for a buzz. If that doesn't describe the Great Depression's creativity, what does? But under all the marketing gloss and cheerful jingles, something darker hums. Workers begin depending on these little pills to survive their grueling shifts. Productivity becomes a chemical equation. The American dream, already fragile, now runs on amphetamine fumes. You pass a diner at 3 a.m., truckers hunched over pie and bottomless coffee, eyes glassy but alive. They call them bennies. The waitress pours refills like a ritual. Outside, neon lights flicker against rain-slick streets. You realize this is where sleeplessness becomes identity, where exhaustion turns into competition. Historians still debate whether the government knew what was coming. Pharmaceutical companies sure did. They sold amphetamines as pep pills for the modern age. Magazine ads promised mental clarity, slim figures, boundless focus. Awake and aware. One slogan said, "Just like you were meant to be, you smirk." Humanity has always been allergic to rest. By the late 1930s, amphetamines are everywhere, from Hollywood film sets to factory floors. Writers claim it helps them meet deadlines. Musicians say it makes the music sparkle. Housewives say it makes chores feel like dance. And somewhere in Berlin, military scientists take notes. The Nazi war machine hasn't yet roared to life, but German chemists are already experimenting with methamphetamine under a new brand name, Perpetin. The idea of a tireless soldier, a man who doesn't need sleep, food, or doubts, sounds too good to ignore. You sip from an imaginary cup of coffee, watching this global web of ambition tighten. The line between self-improvement and self-destruction thins by the day. What began as a little bottle in a pharmacy window is slowly turning into something else, something militarized, industrialized, weaponized. You glance again at the truck driver. His hands are steady now, his eyes bright. He doesn't know that 20 years from now, the same drug will fuel bomber pilots crossing continents. He just knows it helps him make rent. The depression teaches a cruel lesson. The body is an engine, and chemistry can keep it running even when the soul is tired. Outside, dawn creeps over the diner. The driver pays his bill, pockets a few more tablets, and disappears into the pale horizon. You listen to the hum of the truck fade into distance, like the heartbeat of a restless century. The world is waking up faster, harder, and hungrier than ever, and the clock of sleepless progress is ticking louder with each passing mile. You blink again, and now the world is dressed in gray uniforms and red banners. It's the late 1930s in Germany, and the air smells like oil, iron, and fear. A restless hum fills the street's marching boots, barking orders, the distant hiss of propaganda on the radio. The world is preparing for war, and everyone is talking about strength, endurance, and the perfect soldier. But here's the secret. Those perfect soldiers aren't powered by discipline alone. They're powered by pills. You stand in a sterile military lab in Berlin. The walls gleam white, the air sharp with disinfectant. A chemist in a crisp coat shakes a small tin container. The label reads, Pervitin. Inside teeny white tablets of methamphetamine, energy in its purest form, Germany's secret weapon, disguised as medicine. Historians still argue whether the Nazi leadership fully understood what they were unleashing. Some say the military doctors just wanted a way to keep soldiers awake during long campaigns. Others claim Hitler himself believed meth could turn ordinary men into tireless warriors' machines of obedience and destruction. You imagine it, a commander briefing his troops before the invasion of Poland in 1939. His speech is sharp, rehearsed, mechanical. Then he opens a box and slides out Pervitin tablets, telling his men they'll sharpen their focus and banish fatigue. The soldiers nod, pop the pills, and march into history. Within hours, they're unstoppable. The blitzkrieg, the lightning war flashes across Europe with terrifying speed. Tanks roll through cities like steel storms. Pilots stay awake for days, bombing at night and laughing in the morning. Infantrymen march 60 miles without rest, eyes wide, mouths dry, hearts racing like engines. The newspapers call it efficiency. You call it something else, chemically induced madness. A quirky note for you to smile at before it gets too grim. Berlin housewives could buy Pervitin over the counter, too. It was advertised as a mood brightener, even baked into chocolate bars called Hildebrand Schokolade, original energy snack. Imagine biting into a candy that could keep you awake for 72 hours. Sweet dreams, right? But in the barracks, the miracle starts to turn sour. Soldiers begin hallucinating. Some hear phantom artillery in the dark. Others write jittery letters home, rambling about invincibility and paranoia. One German officer described feeling as though the world had been reborn in light and metal. Another simply wrote, "I am God. I cannot sleep." You lean closer to the campfire, where a young soldier trembles. His hands shake even as he tries to light a cigarette. His pupils are huge, his voice flat. The war keeps moving, even when I stop. That's Meth talking. Hitler's inner circle takes notice. Methamphetamine becomes an unofficial fuel for the Nazi war machine. Millions of tablets are distributed through the rank-stank crews, pilots, foot soldiers, all wired, all sleepless. Historians estimate over 35 million doses of Pervitin were issued during the early years of the war. And then there's Hitler himself. Rumors swirl that his personal doctor, Theodor Morel, injected him daily with stimulants, among them a meth-based cocktail disguised as vitamin therapy. Whether it was meth or not is still debated, but the signs are unmistakable. Manic energy, sudden bursts of euphoria, and terrifying rages followed by collapse. You can almost see it's a Führer pacing in his bunker, pupils blown wide, hands trembling as he rants about destiny. The man who wanted a 1,000-year empire might have been running on the same chemical that would one day be cooked in suburban garages. It's strange, isn't it? A molecule born from curiosity, now driving entire armies into madness. You step through a bombed-out street. Rubble crunches beneath your boots. The one's mighty blitzkrieg has begun to sputter. The soldiers, deprived of their pills, crash hard physically, mentally, spiritually. They fall asleep, standing, collapse mid-sentence, tremble with withdrawal. The unstoppable army becomes human, against tired, fragile, haunted. There's an eerie silence after the roar of engines fades. Even victory can't keep the body from demanding rest. By 1945, the miracle drug that promised triumph has turned into a curse. Addicted soldiers roam the ruins of Berlin, still searching for the next tablet. Hitler's empire, once sleepless and electrified, now lies in ashes, its chemical confidence burned out. You take a slow breath. The air smells of smoke and exhaustion. The war is ending, but the drug's journey is just beginning. The knowledge, the recipes, the addiction, they'll survive the rubble and spread across the world like spores. You look up at the gray sky and think about the irony. The war meant to create a superior race has instead created a global habit. Methamphetamine has proven something darkly poetic, that even the strongest nations can resist the temptation to feel invincible just for one more sleepless night. The soldiers are gone now, but their ghosts linger, restless, wired, waiting for the next generation to pick up where they left off. You blink through the smoke and rubble of post-war Europe, and suddenly the world feels quieter. The gunfire is gone. The boots have stopped marching. But the buzz, that restless hum of stimulant energy, hasn't faded. It's just moved to new uniform, new laboratory, new continents. It's now the 1940s, and the war's victors, America, Britain, the Soviet Union, have inherited more than just land and power. They've inherited knowledge, specifically knowledge about methamphetamine. You drift into a chilly Allied military base, where a medic unpacks a crate marked confidential performance enhancement research. Inside, Pervitin samples, field reports, medical notes, a legacy of sleeplessness. The officers are reading them with interest. See, while Germany's meth-fueled blitzkrieg horrified the world, it also impressed them. Those soldiers didn't stop. They fought through exhaustion, hunger, even logic. And now, as the Cold War dawns, No one wants to fall behind, not militarily, not mentally, not chemically. Historians still argue whether this was moral pragmatism or scientific envy. Some say the Allies simply wanted to understand how far the human body could be pushed. Others say they wanted to own the formula of fearlessness. Either way, the experiments began. You watch an American pilot in a khaki flight suit swallowing a small white pill, benzedrine, the clean cousin of meth. He's about to fly for 16 hours straight, patrolling over the Pacific. His eyes sharpen, heartbeat quickens. He feels like a hawk on an invisible current. Commanders call them go pills. The pilots themselves call them courage in a capsule. And in Britain, the Royal Air Force hands them out too quietly, officially, efficiently, for alertness. The label says, the subtext: don't fall asleep over Germany. You can almost taste the irony-eyed soldiers fighting Nazis with the same drug that once fueled the Nazi war machine. History loves its little jokes. A quirky story. In one RAF report, a pilot wrote that benzedrine made clouds look brighter and the war seemed less personal, which sounds poetic until you realize he bombed the wrong target because he'd been awake for 2 days straight. As scientists studied meth's effects, they realized its danger: a fast path to focus and a faster path to collapse. But here's the thing about wars: even the quiet ones, they make exhaustion look patriotic. If sleeplessness wins battles, then sleeplessness becomes virtue. And so, governments quietly stockpile stimulants, laboratories refine formulas, pharmacists produce pep tablets under new names. It's not illegal, yet it's just modern medicine for a modern age. You wander through a post-war American university lab. A young student researcher experiments on lab rats, measuring how long they can run after a dose of methamphetamine. The rats don't tire, they just keep running until they collapse. The researcher notes increased endurance, reduced need for rest. He doesn't write the part about the rats gnawing their own tails after hour 36. Meanwhile, Japan, defeated and demoralized, faces a new problem. Warehouses full of Philippon, their wartime meth brand, are left unused. Instead of being destroyed, they flood the black market. Demobilized soldiers, desperate factory workers, even students begin using it to cope with hunger and hopelessness. Addiction spreads through post-war Japan like fire through paper houses. You can picture it: a man in a tattered suit, staring out over ruined Tokyo, his hands shaking slightly as he takes a dose. It steadies him, fills him with purpose, makes the ruins look repairable. But the next morning, he's empty, again needs more. By 1950, Japanese authorities report hundreds of thousands of meth addicts. Some go mad, some vanish. The government eventually bans it, but the damage is done. Meth has found its first civilian epidemic. Back in the West, doctors are prescribing amphetamines for everything: fatigue, depression, weight loss, focus, even shyness. Pharmaceutical ads show smiling nurses offering little white pills to mothers who need a lift. Housewives swallow benzedrine to clean faster. Students take it to study longer. Soldiers keep it for weekends. You glance at a glossy 1940s magazine ad. The irony is too rich to ignore. The modern life it promises is one long, caffeinated panic attack. Historians still debate Whether this era marked the beginning of our culture's obsession with productivity or just the chemical version of it, maybe both. After all, a society that measures worth by output will always love a drug, but underneath the optimism, cracks are forming. Doctors begin noticing patients with nervous tics, paranoia, insomnia, a few cases of psychosis. One soldier writes in his journal, "The pills make me brave, but when they fade, I see shadows in my own thoughts. The world doesn't want to listen. The war may be over, but no one's learned how to rest. The factories hum, the planes fly, the cities rebuild, and meth hums along with them, invisible but indispensable." You take a deep breath. The air feels heavier now, like history itself is vibrating. The first phase of meth's journey, scientific discovery and wartime necessities, ending. The next one, mass consumption and quiet addiction, is about to begin. You watch the lab lights dim, the scientist's pen stops scratching. Outside, a new kind of war is beginning, not for territory, but for wakefulness itself. You lean on a polished counter in an Atlanta pharmacy sometime in the 1880s. The air smells like syrup and ambition. Behind the counter stands a pharmacist with a mustache sharp enough to slice bread, mixing something in a glass beaker. You can almost hear the fizz, like a tiny storm brewing in liquid. His name, John Stith Pemberton, the same man who would later invent Coca. But tonight, his concoction, ISNT, quite that famous, yet just another experiment in the booming world of tonics, where science and snake oil live side by side. He's adding a little extract of coca leaves and a touch of cola nut. And right there, on his shelf, sits a bottle labeled ephedrine. It's imported from Japan, expensive and strange. Few pharmacists really know what to do with it, but you can see the gears turning in Pemberton's mind. He's not the only one searching for the perfect energy drink of the century. Outside, America is entering a new era. The railroad is stretching its metal arms from coast to coast. Factories are roaring, and cities glow with new electric light. People are working longer, sleeping less, and craving stimulants that help them push through the endless churn of modern life. Coffee isn't enough anymore, so chemists turn to stronger things, coca, and exotic compounds like ephedrine. Historians still argue whether it was curiosity or capitalism that drove them, but either way, the stay-awake culture was born. You trace your finger over a stack of dusty labels: Bromo-Fizz, Vita Coca, Dr. Brown's Brain Elixir. Most are loaded with stimulants, but the science is murky. Nobody knows what's safe. Nobody cares much either. The industrial age demands alertness, not rest. You wander through the aisles and notice advertisements promising miraculous results, banishing fatigue, curing melancholy, reviving tired mothers, all written in curly gold script. And the thing is, most of them work. Sort of, at least for a while. The customers who sip these drinks feel a rush of energy, a bright spark behind the eyes. But the crash comes soon after, and the addiction, well, that's an afterthought for another day. In Germany, meanwhile, a young generation of scientists is getting restless. They've isolated morphine, synthesized heroin, and are now tinkering with stimulants. Chemistry has become a form of magic, turning plants into power. And somewhere, in a quiet Bavarian lab, someone is about to stumble on something that will make caffeine look like warm milk. But for now, you stand in that little pharmacy, surrounded by the ghosts of the 19th century's optimism. There is a kind of innocence to it. All these men in bow ties and aprons truly believe they re-improving humanity, one tonic bottle at a time. You almost feel sorry for them. As you drift further, the scene shifts again. Now you're watching doctors prescribe pep pills made from early amphetamine salts. They call them Benzedrine. At first, they're used for asthma. The pills open airways, help breathing. But someone, probably a medical intern, who hasn't slept for 3 nights notices that after taking one, they feel amazing, alert, unstoppable, a little superhuman. Soon, word spreads. Soldiers, pilots, factory workers, even jazz musicians start using these little white pills to stay awake, to feel good, to work longer. There's a joke in the 1930s. Sleep is for people without Benzedrine. You lean back, letting that thought echo through your head. Humanity has always loved shortcuts. From coca leaves to caffeine, from ephedrine to amphetamine, discovery promises control, energy, focus, and yet each one brings its own quiet price. Historians still argue whether the invention of amphetamine was inevitable. Maybe it was Destinizable next step in a world obsessed with progress. Or maybe it was just a spark of human impatience, that refusal to accept limits as you fade toward the next decade. The hum of the pharmacy merges with the whine of airplane engines, the clatter of factory belts, the rhythmic tap of typewriters. The world is speeding up, and methamphetamine's pure, crystalline cousin eyes just around the corner. You can almost taste the future, sharp, electric, dangerously sweet. You open your eyes to the metallic clang of factory tools and the acrid scent of chemicals that sting your nose. It's 1919, and you're standing in a Tokyo laboratory, not one of those glittering, modern facilities, but a cramped room filled with jars, burners, and dusty textbooks written half in Japanese, half in German. A young chemist named Akira Ogata hunches over his workbench, brow furrowed, carefully heating a mixture that hisses and pops. He's working with ephedrine, that same compound you saw earlier in Pemberton's pharmacy. But Ogata isn't mixing it into tonics. He's breaking it down and rebuilding it from the ground up. He doesn't know it yet, but he's about to give the world its most infamous stimulant, methamphetamine. You can almost feel the tension in the air when he completes the reaction. The glass beaker glows faintly under lamplight as crystal shards form inside, shimmering like tiny diamonds. Ogata takes a cautious sniff, then scribbles something in his notebook, a crystalline derivative of ephedrine with stronger central stimulation. And just like that, history tilts a little on its axis. No fireworks, no lightning bolts, just a tired man in a lab making something that will one day fuel armies, addictions, and underground empires. Methamphetamine is born pure, colorless, and deceptively simple. It slips easily into the bloodstream, crosses the brain's defenses, and floods the mind with dopamine, focus, energy, euphorial, supercharged. If the body were a machine, meth would be rocket fuel. But in 1919, it's still just chemistry on paper. Japan's scientific community takes note, yet the discovery doesn't spread fast. The country is recovering from World War I, its industries modernizing. Ogata's crystalline compound quietly gathers dust in lab records, Still, the timing is poetic. Across the ocean, the roaring 20s are about to explode in jazz, speed, and sleepless ambition. You can almost imagine methamphetamine whispering from the future, "You'll need me soon." Historians still argue whether Ogata truly grasped what he'd made. Some say he only sought a stronger decongestant, a medical alternative to ephedrine. Others suggest he sensed something bigger, a potential revolution in chemistry or in profit. But no one denies that what began in that tiny lab would soon ripple across the world in ways no one could predict. You drift through time again, sliding into the 1930s. Japan, now militarizing, starts to rediscover Ogata's forgotten notes. A pharmaceutical company named Temmler, work in Germany, also begins experimenting with amphetamines, creating what they call pervitina, cousin to meth, but purer, more potent, and far more dangerous. The line between medicine and madness blurs. Back in Japan, methamphetamine, marketed under names like Philippon or Hirapon, becomes a tool for focus, for work, for war. Factories hand it to laborers to keep production going overnight. Students pop it before exam. Even the Imperial Army experiments with it for soldiers who must march for days without rest. And over in Europe, German chemists are perfecting their own blend. The age of the super soldier drug is coming fast. But before we get there, you pause to notice something small and strange. These early users don't see meth as evil. They see it as progress, the miracle of chemistry, the perfect embodiment of the modern spirit: efficiency, productivity, control. You think of Ogata again. Would he have been proud or horrified? Historians still debate whether he lived long enough to understand what his discovery unleashed. His papers suggest he believed methamphetamine could help humanity, not harm it. That's the cruel irony of science. What begins as curiosity often ends as catastrophe. Outside his lab, Japan glows with lanterns and factory lights humming into the night. A new century is in motion, faster than anyone can keep up. Meth will soon ride that current across oceans, through wars, into veins. You take one last look at the beaker on Ogata's table, the crystals glittering like frost in the dim light, harmless, silent, waiting. The sound of the world speeding up has never been louder. And somewhere, the next chapter, the chapter of soldiers, battles, and sleepless empires, is already loading its first breath. You wake to the sound of boots on gravel, the distant roar of planes, and the unmistakable hum of war machines. The year is 1939. Europe is burning, and methamphetamine, the crystalline secret, born quietly in a Tokyo labs, about to become the fuel of empires. You're in Germany now, inside a pharmaceutical factory run by Temmler Work, the company that created Pervitin. Workers in white coats are bottling small, mint-sized tablets by the millions. The label reads, "For alertness, for focus, for victory." At first glance, it looks harmless like aspirin, but you know better. Each little pill carries the power to erase sleep, fear, and exhaustion, to make ordinary men feel invincible. The German army, the Wehrmacht, takes notice. They test Pervitin on soldiers during training. The results are astonishing. Men march 60 miles without rest, fly bombing raids for 2 days straight, and stay unnervingly calm under fire. One military report gushes, "The ideal combat drug has been found." Soon, Crates of Pervitin are shipped to the front lines. Tens of millions of tablets. They call it the Stuka pill, after the dive bombers whose pilots swallow them before missions. And that's how methamphetamine Goddard's quiet laboratory crystal becomes a weapon of war. You imagine a young German soldier crouched in a trench, mud up to his knees, shaking from cold and terror. Then he pops one tablet. Within minutes, his body feels electric. His heartbeat steadies, his fear fades, and his mind sharpens like glass. He feels unstoppable. He is, for a time. Historians still argue whether meth helped Germany blitz through Europe so quickly. Some say the Pervitin-fueled troops were the secret engine of Hitler's lightning war. Others insist the victories came from strategy, not chemistry, but the timing is hard to ignore. Blitzkrieg lightning war sounds suspiciously like a side effect. Meanwhile, the drug's darker side begins to show. After the high comes the crash, paranoia, exhaustion, collapse. Soldiers start hallucinating. Some go violent, others catatonic. Commanders don't understand why their super soldiers are suddenly falling apart. The answer sits in their veins. Back in Berlin, civilian life joins the frenzy. Housewives take Pervitin-laced chocolates to keep up with chores. College students buy it for long study nights. Even Hitler's personal physician reportedly injects the Führer himself with stronger doses as the war drags on. It's no longer just medicine, it's lifestyle chemistry. You walk the streets of wartime Europe, watching the world run on sleeplessness. The Allies notice too. British and American pilots begin taking Benzedrine, a milder amphetamine cousin, to stay alert on long missions. Soon, every major army on Earth is fighting with some form of speed in their system. It's the first truly global stimulant, epidemic, sanctioned, celebrated, and subsidized by governments. But as you float through the smoke of the battlefield, something feels wrong. The soldier's eyes wide, shining, desperate look, almost hollow. They're awake, but not alive. When the war finally ends, thousands return home, addicted, their nerves shredded. Japan's story follows the same arc. During the Pacific War, factories churn out their own version of methylphenidapan, handed out to pilots, sailors, and laborers. After Japan's surrender, massive stockpiles flood the black market. The first civilian meth epidemic begins almost instantly. You can see it in post-war Tokyo, the neon streets, the restless youth, the exhausted workers unable to stop. Meth no longer belongs to the battlefield. It belongs to society itself. Historians still argue whether the drug changed the course of the war. But one thing is certain: it changed the course of peace. The 1940s ended with a world that had learned two terrifying lessons: how to split the atom and how to split the mind. You drift away from the explosions and factories, now, the sound fading into a low hum. Somewhere in the distance, a jazz record plays, a cigarette glows, and a scientist in a white coat jots a note that reads, "New market potential, civilian stimulant use." Because if meth could keep soldiers awake for days, imagine what it could do for ordinary people trying to survive the modern world. You wake in the calm after the storm. The war is over, streets littered with confetti, rubble, and broken men trying to remember how to sleep again. You drift through 1940s Japan first, where the neon lights are flickering back to life. Tokyo smells like rain, ash, and cigarettes. Factories hum again, but this time they're not making bullets. They're making Philippon. It's the same drug soldiers once took before battle-pure methamphetamine hydrochloride, but now it's sold in shiny boxes at corner pharmacies. Housewives buy it to fight fatigue, students to cram through exams, and factory workers to push through double shifts, rebuilding the nation. On posters, smiling women hold vials of Philippon with slogans like "For Energy," "For Success," "For Japan." You can almost taste the irony. The same substance that fueled war is now fueling peace. But peace has its own kind of exhaustion. Millions of demobilized soldiers are hooked on the stuff they can't sleep, can't eat, can't stop. Their minds are still marching, even when the war is long gone. Meth, once a patriotic necessity, turns into a post-war plague. By 1951, the Japanese government realizes it has a monster on its hands. Over 500,000 addicts, arrests soar. Street names appear: Shibu, Philippon, Hiropon, different names for the same sleepless hunger. Meth labs start popping up in alleys and basements, often run by the very chemists who once produced it legally. The government bans Philippon that year, but it's far too late. The streets have already learned the recipe. You step through a narrow alley, the kind where neon reflections blur in puddles. A young man leans against a wall, trembling, eyes wide open at 3 a.m. He's been awake for days. He's not a soldier. He's not studying. He's just stuck. You can feel his pulse from where you stand, fast, panicked, endless. Historians still argue whether Japan's meth epidemic was the first true modern drug crisis. Some say yes. Others point to post-war heroin use in Europe. But what's undeniable is that meth became the world's first industrial addiction. Not a farmer's brew, not an opium pipe, but a mass-produced, government-tested chemical dependency. And of course, Japan wasn't alone. You float west, across the Pacific, to the United States in the early 1950s, the land of new cars, shiny kitchens, and suburban dreams. Doctors start prescribing amphetamines, benzedrine, dexedrine, for everything from depression to diet control to housewife fatigue. The bottles promise productivity and confidence, the same magic words from every decade before. One American ad even reads, "Stay slim, stay happy, stay awake." It's hard to tell whether it's a medicine or a lifestyle mantra. By now, methamphetamine has taken many faces: military ration, medical miracle, miracle diet, party fuel. You might say it's a mirror for its users. It becomes whatever they need it to be. In Hollywood, actors use it to stay thin and energetic. In factories, truckers take it to haul longer routes without sleep. In colleges, students trade pills like candy before finals week. It's all so normal, so socially acceptable, that few notice the tremors beneath the surface. And you can almost hear it, the jittery clicking of typewriters, the clatter of coffee cups, the sleepless buzz of a culture that's fallen in love with acceleration. Meth is no longer a wartime secret. It's a civilian engine, but the crash is coming. It always does. By the late 1950s, emergency rooms start filling up with nervous Rex people hallucinating bugs under their skin. Mothers who haven't slept in a week. Men who can't stop grinding their teeth. Doctors begin whispering about amphetamine psychosis. The medical journals start to panic. The government starts to notice. Historians still argue whether the post-war meth boom was inevitable or if stricter laws could have stopped it. But the pattern was already set. Discovery, euphoria, dependency, disaster, denial, humanity's favorite cycle. You take a slow breath and feel the decade slipping beneath your feet. The neon signs fade, replaced by the soft glow of TV screens. The war is over, but another kind of war, one fought inside the mind, has quietly begun. And somewhere in a sleepy American suburb, a new generation is about to pick up where the soldiers left off. You wander now into the buzzing streets of 1950s America, a world of soda fountains, jukeboxes, and gleaming Cadillacs. The neon lights reflect off freshly waxed floors, and the hum of optimism fills the air. But underneath this picture-perfect veneer, there's a chemical undercurrent shaping lives in ways most people don't yet understand. Methamphetamine isn't just a soldier's secret anymore, it's becoming a civilian companion, slipping quietly into homes, offices, and schools. Pharmacists line their shelves with small, unassuming boxes of benzodrine tablets. Doctors prescribe them liberally, often for minor ailments, tiredness, lack of focus, even mild depression. Housewives are told these pills will make them sharper, more energetic, capable of managing endless chores without a yawn. Students pop them to cram for exams. Factory workers swallow them to meet the pace of mechanized production. The pills are cheap, legal, and socially acceptable. You drift into a college dorm in 1954. A student sits hunched over a textbook, chewing on a tablet. The lights are dim, cigarette smoke curling through the air. His eyes are wide, almost manic, yet alert and focused. He smiles at the margin notes he's scribbled with furious precision. "I can finish the whole term in one night," he murmurs. Historians still argue whether this era marks the first modern recreational use of meth, or merely a continuation of wartime habits transformed into peacetime productivity. Either way, the impact is clear. Stimulants are no longer just medicine. They are a tool of social performance. Efficiency becomes chemical. You step into a suburban home. A mother pours a cup of coffee, slips a pill from a small amber bottle, and sets her children to their lessons. The kitchen smells of sugar, vanilla, and peppermint, the perfect domestic scene. But the mother's eyes flicker with unnatural alertness. She hums along to a radio program, moving at a speed that feels almost mechanical. Somewhere deep inside, fatigue waits to reclaim her, and yet the public largely embraces it. Advertisements portray amphetamines as helpful, even glamorous. One ad shows a smiling woman balancing a baby on her hip while typing a letter and preparing dinner. The tagline reads, "With Dexedrine, you can do it all." The message is seductive. Rest is optional. Performance is essential. And the pill is the shortcut. You wander further into a bustling office. Typists clack away, eyes glassy yet bright, fingers flying across keyboards. One young man gulps down a tablet before a meeting. He feels sharper, more persuasive, almost invincible. His boss doesn't ask questions. Everyone is taking them. Productivity is king. Sleep is a relic. A quirky detail surfaces. Some offices provide benzodrine in little envelopes at their reception desks, like free coffee, but faster, cheaper, and more addictive. Employees joke about chewing the future, unaware that they're becoming the guinea pigs for a nationwide experiment in wakefulness. But as the 1950s progress, the dark side becomes harder to ignore. Medical journals report insomnia, heart palpitation, anxiety, and amphetamine psychosis, hallucination, paranoia, and violent outbursts. Some patients lose weight uncontrollably. Others lose track of reality entirely. Yet regulatory action is slow. The pills are still medicine, still sanctioned by doctors, still socially acceptable. Historians still debate whether this lax oversight was ignorance, corporate influence, or simply society's willingness to tolerate risk for the illusion of control. The pattern is emerging: discovery, adoption, dependency, denial. It's a cycle you've seen before, and one that will continue. By the late 1950s, methamphetamine has embedded itself into American life. The war may be over, but the fight against fatigue, distraction, and human limitation continues chemically. You sense the trajectory from medicine to habit, from habit to culture, from culture to crisis. The hum of the office fades as you drift down a quiet corridor, past flickering fluorescent lights and the soft murmur of exhausted workers. Sleep has become optional. Alertness is mandatory. And meth, small and unassuming in its little white tablet form, is quietly rewriting what it means to be human in the modern world. You slide forward into the 1960s, a world saturated with music, motorcycles, and rebellion. The air smells of gasoline, patchouli, and cigarettes, a cocktail of freedom and recklessness. Methamphetamine has crossed ocean, cultures, and social classes, finding new identities in new places. It's no longer a pill for housewives or soldiers. It's a tool for adventure, endurance, and escape. California's sun blazes over highways lined with chrome and asphalt. You ride shotgun with truckers, their hands steady on the wheel, eyes sharp as the horizon stretches endlessly before them. They pop dexedrine, methamphetamine's legal American cousin, to push through 24-hour hauls. Rest stops are optional. Speed and profit are mandatory. The drugs make the miles shrink, the landscape blur, and fatigue dissolve into a hazy euphoria. Historians still argue whether America's trucking industry would have embraced long-haul culture so aggressively without the chemical boost. The roads hum with the pulse of stimulant-fueled ambition, each mile a testament to endurance and human audacity. Meanwhile, in urban centers, meth enters the underground scene. Beatniks experiment with dexedrine to stay awake during poetry readings that stretch into the early morning. Students raid their parents' medicine cabinets for a little extra focus during finals. In laboratories, chemists tweak formulas, creating stronger, faster, more addictive versions of the stimulant. The pills are still legal, still celebrated, still hiding a sinister undertone. You notice something peculiar. The casual familiarity with stimulants starts shaping culture itself. Music grows faster, speeches become sharper, nights stretch longer, parties don't end. They fade into the next day with eyes wide, hearts racing, and conversations looping like vinyl records stuck in a groove. A quirky note surfaces. In some circles, meth is called Obetrol, marketed for weight loss and energy. Housewives joke about their new miracle friend, unaware that the joke carries a tremor of truth. Productivity, appearance, alertness, all chemically enhanced. And yet, everyone laughs. Everyone believes they're in control. But the consequences are creeping in. Medical reports start documenting nervous breakdowns, insomnia lasting weeks, paranoia, and psychotic episodes. Hospital admissions rise, often quietly. Families whisper about loved ones who just can't sleep, yet no one quite connects the dots publicly. Meth is still medicine, after all. In Japan, Philippon continues to plague post-war society. Street names abound. Shabu becomes a part of everyday conversation. Youth gangs, laborers, and even students rely on it to cope with long hours and limited opportunity. The addiction is no longer individual, it's systemic. Social structures, schools, workplaces, and families begin bending around the presence of this relentless stimulant. Historians still argue whether the 1960s marked a tipping point in meth's cultural integration, or if it was merely another wave in a decades-long tide. Either way, the pattern is unmistakable: discovery, dissemination, adaptation, dependency. You drift through a smoky jazz club, watching musicians tap out endless rhythms, their energy heightened by their eyes glint unnaturally bright under dim lights. They play without pause, without fatigue, riding the chemical wave like surfers on an invisible ocean. The music is intoxicating, the highs are palpable, and just beneath it all, the seeds of chaos stir. As you leave the club, you hear the faint pulse of a highway, the whispers of a laboratory, the low hum of a city that refuses sleep. Methamphetamine is no longer an experiment. It is culture. It is habit. It is a promise of endless energy and the silent cost waiting at the edge of the day. You find yourself drifting into the 1970s, a world painted in lava lamps, bell-bottoms, and neon lights. The air carries the aroma of incense, cigarette smoke, and hot asphalt. But beneath the psychedelic haze, methamphetamine is tightening its grip, transforming from a niche stimulant to a full-blown social phenomenon. In rural America, a new breed of methamphetamine emerges, the crystal form, purer and more potent than the dexedrine and benzedrine pills of previous decades. You walk into a modest farmhouse, the scent of chemicals sharpen your nose. Inside, makeshift labs bubble with mixtures that hiss and smoke. The wiry man with paint-streaked hands stirs carefully, aware that one mistake could blow the roof off. Yet the product is irresistible. Small, crystalline shards that deliver a rush far beyond what anyone has experienced before. Historians still argue whether this crystal meth was inevitable or a product of America's growing counterculture and rural isolation. Either way, it spreads rapidly, initially among motorcycle gangs, truckers, and party scenes, before seeping quietly into towns and suburbs. Meanwhile, cities buzz with meth's earlier iterations. Students continue to take dexedrine to stay awake during late-night study sessions. Office workers pop pills to survive 12-hour shifts. And musicians in underground clubs use it to keep rhythm and focus. The drug's reputation is double-edged productivity enhancer and recreational stimulant. Everyone knows it's potent, but few consider the long-term toll. A quirky story. In one Pennsylvania factory, employees joke that they could outwork the machines if only management would give them more pills. And, for a brief time, it seems plausible. Meth becomes the lubricant for a rapidly modernizing economy, keeping wheels turning, papers filed, and deliveries made. But the consequences deepen. Emergency rooms see more patients suffering paranoia, hallucinations, and heart complications. Families whisper about brothers and sons who never sleep, who talk to themselves, who can't stop cleaning or pacing. Yet meth is still legal in some forms, still marketed for medical use, still socially acceptable in small doses. You drift further west into California again. In Los Angeles, small gangs and street chemists begin producing their own crystal meth, refining it to higher purity and greater potency. The recreational use explodes. Teenagers, young adults, and even housewives are drawn to its euphoric energy. Dealers give it names like crank and speed, a wink to its military and medical past. Historians still argue whether these early home labs created the conditions for America's future meth epidemic. Some say yes, small-scale production made the drug cheap and accessible. Others insist cultural fascination with speed and alertness made the explosion inevitable. Either way, meth's identity is shifting. It is no longer just medicine or soldiers' fuel. It is an addiction waiting for opportunity. You pass by neon-lit diners and smoky bars where patrons trade shards of crystal under flickering lights. Their movements are rapid, almost mechanical. Conversation loops, laughter echoes too loudly, and sleep is a distant memory. Methamphetamine has moved from the controlled environment of a lab to the chaos of society itself. And as you step into the early 1980s, you can sense the next evolution. The drug, once a curiosity and a tool, is about to collide with the modern criminal underworld, spreading in ways that the world isn't ready to control. You drift into the 1980s, a world of neon lights, synthesizers, and endless ambition. The air smells of exhaust, sweat, and cigarette smoke, tinged with something acrid chemical fumes from hidden meth labs that now dot America's landscape. Methamphetamine, once a pharmacist's curiosity and a soldier's secret, has mutated into something larger, darker, and far more pervasive. You find yourself in a small industrial town in California. A warehouse hums with fluorescent light and the faint hiss of chemical reactions. Inside, meth cooks in large glass flasks, crystalline and gleaming under the harsh light. The man at the helm, a wiry, intense chemist, moves with precision born from practice. He's making crystal meth, purer than anything sold in previous decades, with a potency that can keep a user awake for days. The 1980s sees a dramatic shift. Meth is no longer confined to the fringes of society. Motorcycle gangs, urban dealers, and rural chemists alike produce it, creating a supply that floods streets, suburbs, and small towns. The drug infiltrates every corner of American life. Students seeking academic edge, workers looking to survive grueling schedules, and partygoers chasing euphoric highs. Even the average citizen, who might have once dismissed stimulants as dangerous or fringe, now has access to something far stronger than their parents' decks. Historians still argue whether this expansion was inevitable, or if lax regulation and cultural obsession with productivity created fertile ground for meth's explosion. Either way, by the mid-1980s, crystal meth has become synonymous with endurance, ambition, and, increasingly, destruction. In Los Angeles, gangs refine production techniques. Cookers perfect methods that maximize purity while minimizing cost. Street names proliferate: Crystal Ice, Tina. Dealers market it aggressively, sometimes to teens, sometimes to adults, always to those chasing the rush of being awake, being unstoppable. Users report euphoria, energy, and focus that feels almost supernatural. But beneath the glittering promise lies a creeping horror. Hospitals see rising cases of meth-induced psychosis, paranoia, violent outbursts, and hallucinations of insects crawling under skin. Families fracture as addiction silently gnaws at relationships. Mothers lose children to neglect, fathers to rage, siblings to obsession. Meth is no longer a chemical novelty, it is a social contagion. The home lab revolution accelerates. Rural communities, once distant from urban chaos, now become production hubs. Ammonia, pseudoephedrine, and other chemicals are combined in makeshift labs, often in trailers, basements, and backrooms. Accidents, fires, explosions, chemical burns become a quiet backdrop to headlines about addiction and arrest. You watch as a small-town hospital fills with young adults whose skin is pale, eyes jittery, minds racing, bodies exhausted. Quirky yet chilling detail. Some users report talking at impossible speeds, rewriting entire novels, or building intricate models in a matter of hours. The brilliance is temporary, the collapse inevitable. Productivity and destruction now travel hand in hand. Law enforcement begins to respond, but the complexity of meth's chemistry and the decentralized nature of production make regulation difficult. Task forces target large-scale labs, yet dozens of smaller operations flourish quietly, undetected. The drug adapts. The demand persists. Historians still debate whether the rise of crystal meth in the 1980s reflects societal ambition, economic desperation, or simple chemical inevitability. Perhaps it's all three, a perfect storm of human desire and molecular science. You drift through a smoky warehouse, past flasks and glassware, the chemical scent thick in the air. You can almost hear the echo of history: Pemberton's pharmacy, Ogata's lab, the battlefields of Europe, the streets of post-war Tokyo converging in these shards of crystal, all converging in the hands of those chasing energy, focus, and escape. And as the decade presses on, the whispers of the next era grow louder. Meth is about to go global. It will cross borders, penetrate economies, infiltrate cultures, and, in doing so, redefine what it means to be addicted. The seeds are planted. The epidemic is blossoming. You step into the 1990s, a world of grunge, dial-up modems, and the first whispers of a truly interconnected society. The air smells like coffee, smog, and faint chemical tang from clandestine meth labs tucked away in garages and abandoned warehouses. Methamphetamine is no longer just an American problem, it's a global one, traveling silently across borders and oceans, reinventing itself along the way. In the deserts of the American Southwest, labs churn out crystal meth, its purity reaching levels previously unimaginable. You walk past a trailer with glass flasks gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. The cook, a gaunt figure with sunburned skin and jittery hands, measures chemicals with painstaking care. Every gram counts. Every mistake could mean an explosion or arrest. Yet the demand is insatiable. Teenagers, college students, factory workers, and partygoers all chase that same high euphoria, endless energy, and the illusion of invincibility. Historians still argue whether the 1990s marked the real tipping point for meth as a global epidemic, or if it was simply the era when data and media caught up to a problem that had been decades in the making. Either way, the scale of production and distribution now dwarfs anything from previous decades. You drift to urban centers. In Los Angeles, meth infiltrates nightclubs and house parties. In Seattle, it fuels the grunge music scene, keeping bands awake through endless recording sessions and concerts. And in small towns across America, meth quietly dominates, handed off in kitchen tables and parking lots, often under the guise of party drugs or speed. Quirky, yet alarming. Some users report obsessive cleaning binges, hyperfocus on trivial tasks, and the eerie ability to go days without eating or sleeping. It's almost supernatural, a dark side effect of chemistry, amplified by culture. Meanwhile, Mexico begins to emerge as a key supplier. Organized networks refine production techniques, increasing potency and output. Meth becomes not just a local problem, but a transnational commodity. Cartels capitalize on it, seeing the economic potential for a new high-demand drug. The networks are sophisticated, the logistics efficient, and the profit staggering. Law enforcement scrambles to respond, creating multi-agency task forces. But the decentralized nature of meth productions, mall labs everywhere, mobile operations, constant innovation makes regulation like trying to catch smoke in a bottle. Efforts to curb supply often push users further into secrecy and desperation. Historians still debate whether the cultural embrace of meth in music, productivity culture, and party scenes facilitated its global spread. Some argue yes, meth fit the zeitgeist perfectly, a chemical reflection of society's obsession with speed, focus, and excess. Others contend that the economic forces alone were sufficient to make the drug irresistible. As you float through the decade, you notice a subtle but persistent change. The human body can only handle so much. Emergency rooms see psychotic breaks, cardiovascular collapse, and irreversible brain damage. Families fracture, communities strain. Meth is no longer just a stimulant, it's a social disruptor, silently reshaping towns, cities, and economies. And yet, despite the destruction, meth thrives. Its crystal shards gleam under the desert sun, in the glow of club lights, and on the counters of hidden labs. The drug has become a global mirror, reflecting human desire, ambition, and vulnerability in its pure, crystalline form. You drift toward the cusp of the new millennium, sensing the stage being set for an even wider epidemic. Methamphetamine is no longer contained by geography, legality, or culture. It has gone viral, a chemical specter haunting the modern world, ready to leap into the next era with devastating efficiency. You glide into the 2000s and 2010s, a world dominated by smartphones, social media, and constant connectivity. The air buzzes with notifications, advertisements, and the hum of restless minds. Methamphetamine, once a soldier's fuel, a pharmacist's experiment, and a party drug, has now become a global plague, infiltrating lives across continents with unprecedented speed and subtlety. You find yourself in a small, rural town in the United States, the kind with wide streets, empty lots, and the faint smell of fertilizer lingering in the air. A meth lab hides in a trailer behind a modest home, its glass, flasks, and mixing vessels glinting under dim LED lights. The cook moves quickly, methodically, aware that law enforcement could arrive any moment. Yet the lure of profit outweighs fear. The shards produced Heri's crystal, will travel far, entering cities, suburbs, and even neighborhoods you once thought untouched. Historians still argue whether globalization and technological communication accelerated meth's spread more than traditional production networks. What is undeniable is that the internet has become the new distribution hub. Online forums, darknet marketplaces, and encrypted messaging apps allow recipes, techniques, and tips to flow freely, enabling small-time cooks to scale their operations beyond imagination. In urban centers, meth infiltrates nightclubs, college campuses, and party scenes. Users chase the euphoric energy, the hyperfocus, the ability to feel invincible. But with each high comes the inevitable crash, paranoia, hallucinations, sleep deprivation, and violent tendencies. Emergency rooms report a surge of meth-induced psychosis, heart attacks, and neurological disorders. Families disintegrate quietly, often without media attention. The human cost is massive, yet the chemical keeps moving, undeterred. Across borders, Mexico and Southeast Asia emerge as major production hubs. Cartels refine, transport, and market meth globally. Superlabs produce massive quantities, creating a supply chain that spans continents. Meanwhile, local gangs, rural cooks, and urban dealers ensure that the drug penetrates even the smallest communities. Its reach is unprecedented. A quirky but telling detail: in some regions, meth use is so normalized that tiny convenience stores sell energy packages with pills tucked discreetly inside. Users joke about speeding through life, unaware that addiction, health complications, and societal disruption are lurking just behind the high. You drift through the stories of individuals caught in this chemical spiral. Students who cannot focus without it, workers who cannot endure without it, parents who cannot sleep without it. The drug has become both tool and trap, promise and destruction. Historians still debate the role of legislation, public health campaigns, and law enforcement in curbing meth's rise. Some say stricter precursor regulations worked in pockets. Others argue that demand-driven markets simply adapt. One thing is undeniable: methamphetamine, in all its crystalline glory, has entrenched itself as a global crisis, a shadow across modern society. And as you look at the world now, you realize the drug has changed fundamentally, from a carefully synthesized stimulant in a quiet lab, to a wartime performance enhancer, to a civilian productivity booster, and finally to a worldwide epidemic that challenges governments, communities, and families alike. Its story is not just about chemistry, it's about humanity's relentless pursuit of energy, focus, and the illusion of control. The shards glimmer under city lights, desert suns, and fluorescent bulbs, reflecting decades of human ambition, curiosity, and hubris. You sense, finally, that methamphetamine is no longer just a substance, it is a mirror of civilization itself, showing both our ingenuity and our vulnerabilities. You slow your pace now, leaving behind the flashing neon lights, the humming labs, and the endless rush of activity. The world feels quieter, softer. The air smells faintly of night, of rain, and of something settling, a collective exhale after decades of sleepless pursuit. You realize that for all its potency, methamphetamine is just a chemical, a small piece of a much larger human story. Its journey has been dramatic, often devastating, but it is also a reflection of our relentless desire to push limits, to reach beyond what our bodies and minds can naturally endure. Imagine the shards of crystal, once a secret of chemists and soldiers, now scattered across cities, towns, and countries. They glint briefly in the moonlight, harmless until they are touched, ingested, or pursued. And yet, in the quiet, you can see hope. People recover, communities rebuild, knowledge spreads, awareness grows. The shadows of addiction are long, but they are not endless. As you drift through the streets, now calm, the hum of traffic fades to a whisper. Somewhere, a clock ticks, someone breathes deeply, a family reconnects, life continues. Meth's story is monumental, a tale of science, ambition, and human weakness, but it is also a story that reminds you of resilience, adaptation, and the power of awareness. You feel your eyelids grow heavy, the pulse of the world slowing to a steady rhythm. The highs and lows, the laboratories, the streets, the soldiers, and the families all fold gently into the quiet of night. The hum of life, persistent and patient, continues. Now, as you let yourself sink into the gentle darkness, you feel the weight lift, replaced by calm. Sleep is possible. Rest is allowed. The world is vast, complicated, but also full of recovery, renewal, and quiet hope. And with that, you drift, safe in the knowledge that the story, like the night, has its pauses, its softening, and its eventual peace. Sweet dreams.